Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we take a look at the major headlines affecting the Sikh community around the world. And in California, pressure mounts on Governor Newsom to sign off that anti-transnational repression bill, SB 509. But the debate rages as increasing evidence appears that the bill's opponents all seem to be on the payroll of, well, you guessed it, Hindutva. Is anyone surprised? All this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, is our very correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thank you for all of your interaction with not only our comments here, but also on our Substack channel. Just wanted to remind you that Saturday night, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we are going to have a live Substack where you can call in and chat with me about the current violence that's happening across Canada when it comes to the extortion rings and other extrajudicial threats that are out there. So again, that is Saturday night on our Substack channel for Savage TV. Check it out. And don't forget, of course, to like, follow, and subscribe here. Let your friends know about us here at Savage TV, and more specifically here on Perspectives, because we would love to see our viewer counts rise. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed. And James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives today on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll take a look at loads of your great comments at the end of the show. So do stay tuned for those. Right, James, as always, lots to get through. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, we are going to take a look at various stories today, Angus. We're going to start, though, with a Gujarat Indian national who was killed in a motel, or actually in the parking lot outside of a motel in Pittsburgh. Initial concerns, of course, were about the potential racially motivated crime happening. However, with review of more of the facts, I'm looking at it as more a domestic dispute that went awry. Now, the individual who was killed, and you can see in the picture here, both the assailant with his weapon and the hotel staff there, Rakesh Patel, and I would say his middle name, but I don't want to mess that up. But regardless, it appears that Mr. Patel was just a friendly, very concerned worker at the hotel. He's a manager, and he went out to investigate some noise out in the parking lot. At that time, it appeared that there was a domestic dispute between the gentleman shown in the image and a female that was with him at the time. Now, what the dispute was over, we don't know, but we do know that the individual with the weapon did approach Mr. Patel and unfortunately took his life. As that is said, it does not appear that it was racially motivated. Instead, it looks like a Good Samaritan, being Mr. Patel, going out to try and assist guests that sounded like they might be in distress, and unfortunately was attacked and succumbed to his injuries as a result. So again, it doesn't appear that it was motivated by, a hate towards Indian or Sikhs or Hindus or anybody else. As a hate crime, it appears that it was a domestic dispute that really took a bad turn when he went to try and assist in calming things down. Some people online are, of course, questioning why he didn't just call police instead of trying to intervene. But again, a lot of people in the community and people who have stayed in his hotel said no, he was very concerned about the safety of his patrons. He was very much trying to, or always tried to help everybody. And it seemed like he was trying to bring the confrontation down and deal with it without having them in trouble with the law. And unfortunately, this is the result. A very sad ending for a man who was seen as a pillar of the community and someone who had a very big heart. And unfortunately, that is the result. As we swing over, we are going to take a look at what's happening here in British Columbia. Now, there are regulations in relation to sharing unauthorized images of others when it comes to sensual or provocative or any type of, nudity and such. Now, the Intimate Images Protection Act in British Columbia is an act that is here within the borders of BC. Now, with the tribunal who can deal with this and actually significantly put a claim on the alleged or the person who's alleged to have committed this crime in terms of a civil claim, and that means that they could be entitled up to $5,000. This has just been changed, and it's now up to $75,000 that perpetrators could be fined or have to pay to their victims. And that's on top of any criminal charges and other litigation that goes on. Now, this is seen as, by both sides, whether or not it's going to have an effect. This, of course, being a British Columbia provincial act, can be enforced throughout Canada. However, when it comes to cross-border, as we've seen, whether it is Indians or Nigerians or Russians and so forth, who have been using the internet to befriend females or even males as far as that goes, they befriend them as someone their own age and catfishing them and things like that. And then what they do is they either convince them to send pictures or they superimpose the face of the person onto a nude image and then threaten to release that to the public in exchange for whether it's money or other things, or what they call revenge. And it's revenge porn is what they call it, but it's basically when you have basically a separation or a breakup with a significant other, and you turn those pictures into a weapon by releasing them just to humiliate the other person. So these are the different ways in which it can be used, and something that we've seen online when it comes to bullying, harassment, and even has led to some youth committing suicide. So it's a big problem with far-reaching ramifications. As I was saying, though, is that it really doesn't have a lot of bite once this individual is outside of Canadian jurisdiction. Right now, it looks like the province is trying to basically slap a Band-Aid of regional assistance on something that is a global wound. And that is a really tough sell. So they are taking it a step further and trying to work with other jurisdictions, including the UK and others, to try to bring in an enforcement act that can be actually transferred across borders and across continents. And that may help to cut down on some of it that's happening at the behest of nationals of other nations. So again, something that we've seen happen, and sometimes with very tragic results, and other times where it is used as extortion as opposed to revenge. So again, big changes coming. And how does that impact really a lot of what we're seeing? And that, I hope, will be the detailed framework that we see once this is finalized. And that will give us a lot more context. However, when we look at other areas and jurisdictions in Quebec, they actually go after the platform. So, for example, Facebook or Instagram or others. And they can be fined from $5,000 up to $50,000 a day for not removing these images once they've been notified that these are revenge porn or extortion attempts or whatever. So again, they in Quebec have shifted the responsibility to the platforms to make sure that they are policing it and handling it. Meanwhile, Nova Scotia, they have another approach where they allow the Cyber Protection Act to come in, and that applies to the Supreme Court, and they can get a cyber protection order and also go to civil court to make claims against the perpetrator. And some of those claims have gone and seen awards as high as $100,000, $150,000 in some of the Canadian jurisdictions. So again, it's looking at trying to bring together not only Canada, but the world when it comes to holding these people accountable for the behaviors. So again, BC, it's still in the working section, but it looks like this will pass. And you can see that they are the only jurisdiction in Canada that has that automatic opportunity. The benefit of this going before the tribunal and the judicial review is that it doesn't go into the public in terms of releasing the victims' names. And this protects the victims. It reduces the impact of a court system and a lengthy court battle and the personal attacks that can sometimes come out of those. But it also gives them a bit more security, comfort, and some assistance in terms of victim assistance programs, counseling, and again, the anonymity that goes with it to protect them from further victimization online. So that is a big change coming to the British Columbia laws. Now let's skirt on over to the United Nations. We touched on this last night where I told you we would be looking at why India is hoping that Russia's sway at the UN Security Council will help to get them a permanent seat. This is a big, big deal, and a lot of people don't realize how much this could influence not just India and Russia relations, but also global relations. When we look at this, I'm going to skip down in the article and just talk about how it potentially could have an impact when we're talking about Khalistan and where the movement is going, as opposed to what could happen if this is allowed to provide India with that permanent seat. Now, of course, we know that the P5s, or the permanent fives that have those permanent seats already, are Russia, the United States, China, and then, of course, we know that the UK and France have the permanent seats, and apparently Canada doesn't. Isn't that shocking? But regardless, it is probably because we are so closely tied with the UK, with France, with the US, that, it isn't there. But I know that we have tried for the permanent seats in the past, and it has not happened yet. So that just as a side note. However, we should look at there are only certain countries that are looking at blocking it or have concerns about it. Many of those are looking at the need for India to deal with certain issues within their own borders, including human rights, but also whether or not they can get a veto power that could give them an advantage in negotiating and geopolitical deals that could impact Pakistan or other parts of Asia. So one of the comebacks was that they give certain vetoes to the others in the region without giving them a permanent seat, so such as Pakistan. So again, that could be a big issue as well. Now, as I said, my bigger concern would be what this means for the potential of Khalistan. And this is because the UN Security Council, by having a permanent seat, they could actually further their agenda of falsely identifying certain groups of dissidents, of opponents, and politically or otherwise, by giving them that transnational security tag as terrorists. As we know that India likes to use that term within their own borders, this would allow them to put it on the international stage. Now, this could, of course, impact the Khalistan movement, which is, really whether or not the UN would recognize and whether or not India could use that veto to supersede any decisions of recognition for Khalistan when it's formed. But also, when you look at the other areas of it, is that the UN seat could also change the way in which Canada and India are talking and dealing with certain security concerns. Again, if India is allowed to have that permanent seat, and they turn around and declare that all Khalistan movement people, any of the people spreading information, which is true, I'm not saying disinformation, I'm saying spreading information about the benefits of Khalistan, technically could be targeted under international law instead of just being an irritant of Canada. And so that takes it a real big step forward for India's propaganda machine and for their use of it in a nefarious way. Now, what does that mean as well? Well, of course, you can look at the veto as a defensive shield and offensive tool. So again, as I said, they can use that to block a lot of international support for Khalistan. They could name the Khalistan movement, whether it's Sikhs for Justice, whether it's United Sikhs, anybody that they don't agree with. Now, instead of just targeting them under India's National Security Acts, they could actually target them with the UN international laws. And that creates a lot of tension and a lot of probable issues that are going to arise from that. And what happens is that when you look at it, the United Nations Security Council designation for these particular groups would mean that Canada is legally obligated to act, regardless of our own laws for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of gathering. All of these things would be impacted because if we failed to act, it would look or it would be perceived as Canada not enforcing international law and international agreements. So this has a massive, massive impact on the Sikh diaspora here in Canada as well. And technically, it could be any other diaspora. It's not just the Sikh diaspora that could be targeted by this. And the diplomatic leverage that would happen is that there's going to be a big shift decisively in India's favor. And that would, again, as I said, compel Canada to take more concrete and verifiable action against any groups on its soil that India deems that they want to target. So again, I think that there are really, really scary implications of India getting that UN seat, that permanent seat, even though they've been a part of the UN for decades and one of the founders, if I'm not mistaken, from its inception, but not in a permanent way or a permanent seat recognition. So again, this could have big, big consequences. It could also force the Khalistan movement to actually go into hyperdrive with the campaigns, with the referendum, but also to really accelerate on a global scale the push for the recognition of Khalistan. So it could speed that up. I know, Angus, you and I have talked about a 5-year, prediction of Khalistan coming to fruition, or at least the big step anyway to get that recognition and get it started. This could really accelerate that timeline in the fact that it could be a dangerous weapon that they hand India when it comes to any type of dissent or any type of recognition of sovereign states, whether it's Kashmir, whether it is Punjab or anywhere else. So big concerns there, folks. You can read the full article on our Substack. I've gone into great lengths on that, but we just couldn't cover it all in this show. Now, as we look at international issues, we are very familiar, at least I assume that we are, and you as well, in terms of the narcotics targeting of the U.S. Now, the U.S. has been, you can see this boat that's been targeted by the U.S. military in international waters and off the coast of Venezuela. When the boats hit international waters, they are under the UN open seas laws and international laws of various levels, or various agencies and organizations and international referendums and agreements and so forth. By the United States taking unilateral action and declaring that these cartels or suspected cartels are open targets. They are labeling them as unlawful combatants. That takes it from a law enforcement view to a Department of Defense view, or as they call it now, their War Department or Department of War, or who knows this week. But in any event, this is a major, major shift. And that is because it is once again seen as transnational repression, as being the judge, the juror, and the executioner of individuals that are in open waters. They are not even close to the U.S. coast or to U.S. waterways. This also is a clear breach of the United Nations when it comes to human rights, when it comes to judicial practices, and even historical norms. And with that said, there are several types of laws that could be interpreted or implemented here. And that goes without saying that it goes between what's required lawfully for people to have the right to trial, to arrest, to all of these due processes of law. And then there are the ones that cover the military actions and the fact that they cannot just open fire and blow these people out of the water, destroying alleged evidence and everything else. Now, this is the result of the Department of Justice, what they call the Office of Legal Counsel. And they have done this with it being a confidential and top secret document. So we can't even see who's been named on this list. They are just saying it's a confidential list of who we're going to target, how we're going to target them, and we feel that by relabeling them as active combatants, that we have the right to just go and act and basically just blow them into bits. And that's so far been the result for 21 people. And yeah, it is just a scary model. Now, the reason why I bring this one up is, again, looking at how that changes international diplomacy, how it changes international law, and how that changes to a conflict with many of the members, not only of the UN and other trade and worldly organizations, but also within human rights organizations, non-governmental organizations, or NGOs that are calling this just a human rights, just a total flagrant disregard of human rights. So the concern, of course, now is that if this is allowed to be recognized, what's going to happen is that you're going to see other countries, and we're going to use India as the example because that is a concern I have, that they are going to take they're going to cherry pick parts of the international humanitarian law versus the international armed conflicts regulations or laws. Now, what's happening is the states is cherry picking from both to try and get coverage for their actions, while also saying that it allows by picking certain parts, allows them this power to do it. If you go to India now, of course, we know that they are, again, as we stated in the last story, is that they have no problem using their national security laws that are really, really loosely based and really there to give any coverage to the government of India, whether it's Modi and the BJP or otherwise. And that means that they are using a lot of force against people. And we always see where they claim that there was an altercation between law enforcement in India that resulted in the death of, most of the time, it's minorities. And this only allows India to come back and say, well, because we have certain agreements with the United States in terms of terrorism, in terms of security, and other ways, they can come back and say the U.S. is participating in these extrajudicial killings and allowing it because they say that they've got a legal coverage to do so on the international stage. This allows India now to go ahead and claim the same protections as Donald Trump is claiming by just labeling anybody as a narco unit or a narco cartel, even when they are not, because, again, they are destroying any and all evidence that could potentially prove yes or no that they are not involved. So again, that is opening up to a very serious vulnerability that could be utilized against the Sikh people in Punjab, especially along borders, saying, oh, they're part of a cross-border drug syndicate, and therefore we had the right to go and bomb them. Now, some of the points, of course, that they're already using are the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. We know that. They're already using the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and the National Security Act, as well as the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. So they have all of these, but this is going to give them the almost a green light to go after people and just falsely name them as narco-terrorists. And that should be a big concern, especially for the states and regions along the India border that definitely could be targeted by the Indian military even further than they already are, Angus.
Yeah, it is. It is actually quite concerning. This. It's all in a label, isn't it? You can label somebody something, and suddenly they then occupy a completely different legal framework. And right. Again, this reflects very much the case in India, where India have changed the label of Khalistani democratic campaigners into terrorists, and people like Amritpal Singh suddenly find themselves locked away essentially forever, and Jagtar Singh Chauhan, plus many, many others who now just languish in Indian jails under these nefarious legal instruments, the UAPA, the NSA, etc. But of course, yeah, in the States, there's this level of hypocrisy. The United States has used the same labels, as indeed has the West. They've used this label of terrorist to enact an agenda. Now, on the whole, generally speaking, the West do seem to use these legal instruments, I would say, generally fairly, but there have been some abuses of it. And certainly here in the UK, we've had a few low-level cases of this. But yeah, the US administration labelling narcotics drug runners as what they call it, unlawful combatants. It's all in a label, isn't it? Suddenly they have this legal right, according to, at least in their perspective, this legal right to kill them extrajudicially. But of course, this has been going on for years. In fact, for decades. We only need to think back to the aftermath of the Iraq War, Afghanistan, all these sorts of things. A lot of the killings that happened and ongoing, these drone attacks in the Middle East, in various parts of the world, they're all extrajudicial killings, just by definition. These people are killed by US piloted drones. There was no judge, there was no jury. They are assumed to be guilty. And again, it does raise huge questions, and I think there are many people in the West who are a little bit uncomfortable about the use and misuse of these so-called powers to enact extrajudicial killing, because who says they are terrorists? Who is actually defining these people as terrorists? And as we've said many times, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So again, it's all about perspective. It's all about labels. Even labelling the Bishnoi gang as terrorists. Again, well, we obviously support it because we stand on one side of that debate. But there are others who say, well, they're not terrorists, they're just simple criminals. So this, again, you can see how dangerous this argument is. And of course, the US has been using this argument for decades, as we witnessed almost weekly on the news as another so-called terrorist leader is assassinated. Israel's been doing it. Likewise, lots of extrajudicial killings. But, it is a legal problem, and it is a moral problem. It is a quandary, because ultimately bad people in this world do need to be removed, but there is a process of law. The trouble is, though, of course, the US should set an example. It is the most powerful nation on earth. And India, like you said, James, is saying, well, if you do it, so can we. You can't turn around and tell us we're doing wrong because you're up to it all the time. So, and the trouble is, of course, America has adopted this attitude where they bestride the global stage, and they will enact as they see it, these legal acts of killing, these there's a paradox there, these legal acts of extrajudicial killings, and the attitude is, well, what are you going to do about it? And that unfortunately is the attitude, and they know they can get away with it because nobody can actually stop them. They are the most powerful nation on earth, and that really is the rub of it. That's the problem. And I want to just quickly go back to the discussion about the United Nations Security Council. India potentially joining. This is big news. This is actually very worrying in many ways. And it's very interesting. The UN Security Council, at the moment, is the only body, part of the United Nations, that has the power, the authority to issue resolutions that are then binding on all member states. So so if you're a permanent member, the P5 as they're called, they of course hold enormous sway. They hold enormous power on the decision making, on the policy making of these resolutions. And this is where it gets rather interesting, because we have on one side the United States, the United Kingdom and France. On the other side, you've got Russia and China. So at the moment, there is this unbalanced, this unbalanced five, and actually in many ways it's helped us obviously in the West, because of course Western nations and the Western democracies dominate the Security Council. But where does India lie? Because if India joins as a permanent member, and this is the big question, does India ally with the West, or does it ally with China and Russia? Now, if you look at recent events, it's likely they're going to ally with Russia and China. That creates a very interesting situation, because suddenly then you've got a divided Security Council of the P5. You've got Russia, China, India, and then US, UK, France. So decision-making suddenly become more balanced, interestingly. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's a good thing in many ways, but it does mean that dominance of the P5 by the Western democracies is suddenly gone. And this, again, is part of the reason why it's likely that the West will resist India joining. Unless they know they can rely and trust India as a potential ally, they are going to resist very strongly India joining that top table of the United Nations. The big question is, Does the UN really hold that much power? Again, it's very debatable. But as I said, and you pointed to in your report, James, it does have the power to impose binding resolutions on member states. So that's where it does become interesting. So, but ultimately, in terms of Khalistan and our audience's interest in Khalistan, I suspect if India is likely to get a seat on the P5, I suspect that the West will do everything in its power behind the scenes, as it tends to do, to interfere in Indian politics internally and try and accelerate the breakup of India. Because if India's broken up, there's no seat on the P5. So India needs to be very careful what it wishes for, because if it makes an enemy of the West has proved itself utterly ruthless. We've invaded countries for less, so India needs to be very, very careful here. And India plays a very shrewd game, or at least it thinks it's playing a shrewd game. It plays all sides against each other and never actually picks sides. But it is increasingly seemed to be aligning with the authoritarian regimes of China and Russia, and that is making itself an enemy of the West. And as a result, the West could decide, you know what, we actually like this idea of Khalistan because it suits us. It suits our geopolitical strategy in the region. And to achieve Khalistan, we need to break up India. So, James, as I said, they need to be careful what they wish for.
Absolutely. And I mean, in the article, I go over that, as well as when Russia broke up, or the USSR, and how Russia was able to take that transition of the permanent seat, and how that may also impact if India was to break up after they received that seat. Who would end up with it? Would it be Delhi, or, depending on how it went that way? So yeah, it's very interesting, and much more detail on the Substack. And then just a quick note from last night, Angus, that the identification of that shooter in Surrey at the SkyTrain station, and soon after at the police station, was not involved, or does not appear any link whatsoever to any type of the extortion attempts. It looks like it was an individual with either mental health issues or potential gang activity outside of anything that we're talking about with extortion and that. So I just wanted to clarify that on tonight's show here.
Great, indeed. And another argument for saying we need to remove guns from normal society. People like that can get hold of them. So anyway, let's move on to California and SB 509, this bill that is in the news a lot at the moment. Obviously, we're waiting for Gavin Newsom, the governor, to sign off this bill. Of course, he's getting hit from all sides, one side saying you've got to sign it, another side vociferously arguing you mustn't sign it, it's an outrage, etc. There's been an interesting article, again, it's the Sacramento Bee, this excellent news outlet that's based in California. They've written a good analysis of this. And actually, as we've discussed this, of course, there has been clearly some opposition to this bill. That it hasn't been an overwhelming support. There has been some opposition, some of it from very surprising quarters, including law enforcement. And even I've asked on the show before, why on earth would some members of law enforcement want to stop this bill from happening? On the face of it, this bill is a very good thing. It protects people. So why would somebody on the legal side resist it? Well, all is revealed if you continue watching, because this article goes through a lot of the analysis. I'm again just going to cherry pick some interesting parts of it. It says California could become this first state in the nation to create protections for people who are targeted by foreign nations if the governor signs legislation. So, as I said before, this could California would be the first state, but it's likely it will have a national impact as well. Now, backers of the bill point to instances in California when Iranian dissidents were stalked for their advocacy, Chinese activists have been attacked at protests, and when Sikh activists have been targeted with assassination. And this really is a very important part of this bill because, of course, the bill has been written very deliberately to target all transnational repression, not just India's transnational repression, and this really is the centre of this debate. And backers of the bill have said, look, it actually targets all transnational repression from all states. Now, the bill itself was primarily sponsored by Caballero, State Senator Anna Caballero. Jasmeet Bains is in there. She's the local assembly member. She's been a huge advocate for Sikh rights, particularly, and she's been amongst a whole team that have pushed this forward, and they have seen this growing threat of transnational repression. But opponents of the legislation have said it will create threats to freedom of speech and unfairly targets India. Now, here we go. The Coalition of Hindus of North America, CONA as it's known. We've talked a lot about CONA in the past. It is a well-known Hindutva organisation. It basically speaks on behalf of Hindutva. It always advocates, it always lobbies on behalf of the Indian nationalists, the Hindutva nationalists, the Hindutva extremists. They, of course, are claiming now that this on an FBI list of 20 transnational repression cases in the US, only one case has been against India. The rest are related to countries like China, Iran, and Russia. And then they go on to quote, so why this misplaced focus, especially given the alarming levels of anti-Hindu hate recorded by the California's hate hotline, and as well as multiple attacks on Hindu temples? Now, there's an awful lot of paradoxes here. There's a lot of contradictions here, because on the one side, Kona and all these other Hindutva organisations in the US are opposing this bill, saying, look, it's all biased against India. It's written because it's all against India. And yet, as many advocates have said for the bill, said it isn't. It's actually written to combat all transnational repression. And Kona themselves have just admitted themselves that the FBI are only investigating one case against India and 19 cases against other countries like China, Iran, and Russia. So again, they've rather shot themselves in the foot here, saying, well, it's all about India. No, it's not. You've admitted yourselves it's not all about India. Even law enforcement, FBI, are not focusing on India because it's coming from other areas. And so they say, why this misplaced focus, especially given the alarming levels of anti-Hindu hate? Well, again, there's this contradiction. FBI, if there was this level of anti-Hindu hate, the FBI would be dominated by anti-Hindu hate. It's not. It's transnational repression from other nations. So again, the whole stance against this is contradictory. You know, they contradict themselves. Now, the opposition. So, where is this opposition coming from? Despite unanimous passage, because of course there is a huge support for this, and it is pretty much unanimous support for the bill, it is facing stiff opposition, primarily from several influential Hindu non-profits. Yeah, some of the names that we're very familiar with. Of course, the Hindu American Foundation, another name alongside Kona that, again, we talk about regularly, is another Hindutva mouthpiece. And the Hindu American Foundation, the HAF, helped defeat a similar measure last year with claiming that the legislation was biased against the Indian government led by Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The legislation's most passionate backers, unsurprisingly, are from the Sikh community, around 250,000 Sikhs in the state in California. So, of course, they have been hugely instrumental in getting this bill to where it's got to so far. But many are concentrated in the Central Valley. And this, again, is quite an interesting... and if you're based in California, as I know a lot of our audience are, we're not, James and I are not so familiar with Californian politics, but clearly Californians will be. And there is this sort of divide between the Central Valley and Silicon Valley in this other area, which is made up of other diaspora communities. And of course, Silicon Valley, YouTube, Google, Microsoft... We do know there are a lot of Hindutva agents working in the likes of Google and Microsoft, etc. And we ourselves are victims of this. We've been shadow banned, we've been demonetized, etc. because these agents are working in Silicon Valley. So again, you can start to see the political, religious divide between the Hindu-dominated areas of Silicon Valley, and then we have the Sikh-dominated particular areas of the Central Valley. Now, Dan Stanton, a name that, again, is a very familiar name. He's an ex-CSIS operator. He's quite a very intelligent spokesman. And he's spoken out a lot about Indian transnational repression. He is very familiar with India's operations, particularly obviously in Canada, but he does spread internationally. He's kept a close eye on this because he obviously has a very vested interest in this from the intelligence community perspective. And he said this kind of training of local law enforcement that SB 509 will bring in is really needed because transnational repression activity has become increasingly sophisticated. The challenge for law enforcement is in tracing the criminal activity back to a foreign state. The foreign state has deniability built into its operations. Police need to understand the methodologies used to build a criminal case. Again, he knows what it's about. He knows how India goes about this. They use proxy killers. They always have this legal fire break that if these proxy killers are caught, then there is no legal comeback on the Indian state. They know that it's plausible deniability. That's how India gets away with it. Well, at least they think they get away with it. Legally, they might get away with it, but we all know and everybody knows that they are behind it. And so Dan Stanton is saying, look, we need to train our law enforcement to recognise this plausible deniability. In other words, to recognise who the real perpetrators of transnational repression are coming from.
Right.
And Hindus, many from Silicon Valley, where thousands of Hindus live and work, also came to Sacramento to speak out against the bill. So again, unsurprisingly, all the Hindus, the Hindutva forces, have poured out of Silicon Valley, all pushed along by Hindutva to say, you've got to speak out against this bill. So again, that's where the main opposition is coming from. Interestingly, though, as I said in the opening, there is some law enforcement back who are trying to stop this bill going through. Now, let me have a look. Here we go. It says in the article, a few in California law enforcement have joined the opposition. Now, the most noticeable character in the opposition is this guy. He's the DA, the District Attorney, Jeff Rosen. He's a Santa Clara District Attorney. And his jurisdiction, again, unsurprisingly, covers much of Silicon Valley, much of the Hindutva occupied area. Now, this guy helped promote a Hindu American Foundation training in 2024. Yes, again, this Hindutva organisation, the HAF. He promoted some of their training last year for law enforcement. So much of law enforcement was trained by a Hindutva propaganda training exercise. And that conference was geared into educating all the local enforcement entities about Hindu traditions and to highlight, for example, unsolved graffiti incidents at several Hindu temples. Here we go again. Yeah, the old graffiti argument, the false flag graffiti. We've been there before. Yeah. But an investigation revealed that the training contained, for example, at least one session on what it called Khalistan, a movement of hate, violence and extremism. And again, you can start to see the propaganda just spewing out of here. Because yes, according to Hindutva, Khalistani campaigners, democratic, peaceful Khalistani campaigners, are part of a movement of hate, violence and extremism. In other words, they're terrorists. Yes, again, the training also described Najjar as the leader of a terrorist organisation. It also described other Sikh organisations being linked to organised crime and terrorism. Again, this fake narrative, this false narrative that's now being actually inserted into training Californian law enforcement. And again, this is a story we have talked about before, where Hindutva is so powerful and so well resourced that they are now providing training to the local police forces and law enforcement agencies. And of course, that training is absolutely embedded a whole anti-Khalistan narrative. Khalistanis are terrorists. You need to target Khalistanis. And interestingly, this guy Rosen, he, as part of his opposition to the bill, he actually wrote a letter to Gavin Newsom. And in that letter, he wrote, basically, he put a copy and paste passage from a letter originally written by Americans for Hindus. That's a lobbying group that donated $4,000 to his own political action committee this year. So again, you can start to see this web of what is basically corruption, this web of Hindutva lobbying. Hindutva are paying Rosen to represent them. So unsurprisingly, Rosen is now lobbying against this bill because essentially he's being funded, supported by Hindutva. And even to the extent where he's copy and pasted a whole paragraph from a known Hindutva organisation into his own letter. So again, it's very clear where his loyalties lie. Now, Rosen's opposition letter didn't mention Sikhs specifically as part of the campaign, but as I said, the letter which he copy and pasted from, that original letter came from a lady called Geeta Sikand. She's the vice president of Americans for Hindus, again, this Hindutva organisation. And they themselves have been very openly anti-Sikh. Who is the lead sponsor in the California Assembly of SB 509? A pro-Khalistan supporting Assemblywoman Jasmeet Kaur Bains. Yes, Jasmeet Bains, who we talked a lot about. This is a quote from this letter. So she's also sponsored the anti-Hindu bill last year that, again, they managed to defeat. The anti-Hindu legislator has penetrated the California legislature. This is this lady Sikand who's writing, again, who's calling out Jasmeet Bains for being, well, unsurprisingly, she's supporting and advocating for the Sikh community. And what she says, it's a lesson on how a small group of Khalistanis and Islamists can destroy the economically richest, academically smartest and politically dumbest community in the USA. I think you can draw your own conclusions from those pretty evocative or provocative words from this person, this Hindutva person. Now, Jasmeet Bains basically came back and said, they've embraced the tried and true authoritarian tactic of labelling entire groups of people as terrorists. So Jasmeet Bains has called it out for what it is. And again, well, we don't need to preach the converted again. Now, one example of what's been going on locally. this guy named Deep Singh, known as Deep Singh. He led a Sikh march to Sacramento, again, part of this sort of lobbying about the last year's bill. He has confirmed that the former police chief of Fresno confirmed likewise that last year a group of Hindus met with the police chief and the mayor, claiming that this guy, Deep Singh, who goes by the name Deep, was aligned with terrorists and organised crime and should be surveilled. So again, this is part of this lobbying by Hindutva. So they're training the local enforcement, and they're now actually basically literally knocking on the doors of law enforcement saying, look, you need to watch out. These guys are terrorists. So they're reporting local Sikh campaigners, Khalistani activists. And in fact, Deep Singh is not a Khalistani activist. He himself said, I'm not part of the Khalistani campaign, but because he's a Sikh, he is being targeted, and he actually campaigned for last year's bill. He's now being targeted by Hindutva, who are literally going to law enforcement and reporting him, saying he's been up to all sorts of no good, etc. Now, fortunately, the city's police chief, this guy Paco Balderrama, said he found the allegations to be strange because Deep is such an upstanding member of the community. So again, people are starting to ask questions about the Hindutva lobbyists, saying, look, you're saying all these things, but these guys, the local Sikhs, are peaceful, they're democratic, they're actually contributing, they do savour in our local communities, they're actually contributing massively to our community. So again, they're raising eyebrows to this nonsense propaganda, this lobbying coming from Hindutva. Now, Jasmeet Bains said just the other day, I urge the governor to lead the nation by signing this important bill, especially in light of the rise in political violence and attacks on freedom of speech escalating. California must step up to the plate. Absolutely, really important words. And then I just want to finish this off with another article actually written in a local legal magazine. This is written by a lawyer, a local lawyer in California, who's talked at great length, has actually worked, I think, on the fringes of this. Hamid Yazdan Pana. She's the co-exec director of the Immigrant Defense Advocate. So basically, they act legally on behalf of immigrants to protect all immigrants of all ethnicities and backgrounds. And she said, California's immigrant communities face countless challenges, from housing insecurity to limited access to healthcare, yet one growing problem remains under the radar despite its profound implications for safety and democracy: transnational oppression. Our state is home to more than 125,000 torture survivors, more than any other in the nation. Many fled regimes that imprison or kill people for daring to speak freely. Powerful words, and again, very clearly, it does talk about India within that. Some critics have tried to turn this bill into a divisive issue, suggesting it favours one group over another. But this framing misses the mark. Training law enforcement to better understand and respond to these threats is not a partisan issue. It is a public safety issue. The bill is not about politics, it's about people. It's about the survivor in Los Angeles who still looks over their shoulder. It's about the journalist who wonders whether their reporting will make them a target. And it's about ensuring that California keeps its promise to be a true place of refuge. Crafted with input from many communities, not just the Sikh community, SB 509 does not discriminate against anyone. It offers a common sense solution to a problem that too often goes unseen, yet poses a threat to us all. In an era of escalating threats and fear, California must lead. SB 509 is how we begin. So there you go, James. Powerful words. And that's from a lawyer who's saying everything that the Hindu lobbyists, the Hindutva lobbyists are saying is nonsense. This is not anti-India. This is anti-all transnational oppression. And what's going on now, what all these articles and all the debates going on, what it's doing is highlighting the effect, it's highlighting the existence of Hindutva forces in the US, how powerful they are, and actually, clearly, how wrong they are. They're contradicting themselves, they're sticking their heads above the parapets, and in my opinion, James, they're making fools of themselves.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's face it, I mean, it is a no-brainer that they need to have more training and more tools available to law enforcement, whether it's state, federal, or local. It's a no-brainer. We know that there are threats from India, from Eritrea. We know that there are threats from Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. It's not just about India, but it's interesting that, guilty conscience kind of shows up there going, exactly. It's not us. So again, it just shows that they are guilt by just the association of a conversation, and that goes and speaks volumes. As for what was his name there, Mr. Rosen, I looked at his picture and I thought, if he ever has to move out of that northern part of California and he gets fed up with the paycheck from the Hindutva media, he could have a great career as a Muppet on the Muppet Show or Sesame Street or something. He looks like one of those scary Muppets.
Indeed, absolutely.
So, with that said, I mean, yeah, it is, as I said, it's a no-brainer. It's a great bill, I think, that is going to offer a lot of opportunities for law enforcement to be able to detect it. And it's only going to get worse in terms of foreign interference from here on out, as we are so much more connected to our devices and the use of AI and other, deep fakes and all of that. So again, use common sense, folks. But at the same time, I mean, this is a common sense approach.
Indeed, and let's move from let's leave the Muppets of Hindutva behind and move on to our more intelligent, fortunately, audience who've contributed some fantastic comments over the last few days. Right, we'll start off with Bikramjit Sohal. This is quite concerning. Yesterday, was a few days ago now, RSS mobs attacked a Gurdwara in Rajasthan at night when the Sikhs were sleeping, including children, and attacked 25 Sikhs ended up in hospital, including children, 9-10-year-old children. And the Gurdwara had actually written to the Supreme Court in advance to say, look, we've been threatened by a local BJP leader, and lo and behold, this attack has happened. Unsurprisingly, police were there, nothing happened, no one's arrested. That's how the government treats minorities in India. Thank you for your topic. Well, thank you for your comment and letting us know these things, because a lot of these things never reach, they certainly don't reach international headlines, and it's very unlikely that they'll very often reach domestic headlines, because we all know why, James.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that we rely on the audience as well, because when some of these things do break out into media on the international markets, it's in the diaspora focused papers or online news sources. So therefore it's in Punjabi or sometimes even Hindi. And of course we don't get that, and we don't understand it. So again, we can see a headline, but without being told what it's about or being able to find it so we can have it translated, then yeah, again, it's important that you reach out and let us know as well.
Indeed. So yeah, thanks for letting us know that. Again, it's just it's welcome to the divisive politics of the BJP India. That's really what it comes down to. This is again why we need Khalistan more than ever. This is a really interesting comment. Thank you, InMeat92, for this. Talks about, and again I'll just paraphrase it, but talking about Pakistan. And how Punjab was divided in 1947, West and East Pakistan. Islam obviously took over the Pakistan side. And as you say, why don't you talk about the atrocities that Pakistan's inflicted on the Sikh community? We need a corridor to visit Kartarpur Sahib, etc. And yet the Pakistan Punjab is now dominated by Islam. The birth of Sikhism is Punjab. Sikhs need visas to visit what was, again, their land before, a country that should never have been made and should never exist. Why are all the Sikhs in Pakistan under Islam? Right, okay. It's not Pakistan's fault, and it's not the Muslims in Pakistan's fault. It was the British fault in 1947. They drew that line. They knew, and actually pre-1947, the Muslims and the Hindus were already actually arguably moving towards civil war anyway. There was so much violence already being generated. The British knew what was going on. The British pulled out deliberately because they sensed there was a potential civil war. They said, look, you know what, we're going to wash our hands of this. So they drew this arbitrary line. So you can blame the British for the arbitrary line. But of course, then we had that mass exodus of the Muslims moving to East and West Pakistan, Hindus, Sikhs, Christians moving out, etc. So that's, and I think you should read a lot about that if you want to know more about that, because I think you simplifies it, and it's not the Muslims' fault, it's not the Sikhs' fault, it's nobody's fault other than it was actually the Brahmins and the British at the time. They're the people who you should be angry against. And you continue to say there are millions of Sikhs in India, but none in Pakistan. Well, that's why, because that's what happened post-partition. There is a greater Sikh population in other countries like the US, Canada, Britain, etc., compared to Pakistan. Again, for that very same reason. So the birthplace of Islam is the Middle East. Why don't you discuss this in addition to the problems with India, which I acknowledge do exist? Yeah, again, it's a huge discussion, this. Pakistan is primarily Islamic because of 1947, because of the politics of partition. That's why it is primarily Islam. Islam, by its nature, is a very domineering, is that the right word? It's a very I'm trying to think of the right word. It wants its own territory, and you're right. Middle East is primarily Arabic. It's Islamic. as is Bangladesh, as is Pakistan. But again, this is a legacy of partition. India was supposed to be a bit more of a melting pot, but there are Muslims in India, and this is again creating the divisions. This is why Hindutva are so angry and so powerful again, because they hate Muslims. By definition, they exist to hate Muslims, and that's where a lot of this division has come. But what I would say in your comment, and again, sadly we don't have time to really have a proper discussion about this, is that don't turn your ire against the Muslims, and vice versa. The Muslims don't turn your ire against the Sikhs. We've all lived amicably together in the past. We can do in the future. The combined ire should be against these ruling elites, whether it's actually ironically of the West, but also of India particularly, the Brahmins, James.
Absolutely. And again, I think you've summed it up well there, because we could spend a whole episode just going over this as well. And we've gone into great lengths about this in past episodes, looking at partition and the deceit of the Hindutva and the Brahmins when it came to screwing over the Sikhs, for a lack of a better term. And that's what happened. And it is a shame that that's how it went, and that's how the border was laid out in partition. But again, you can check out some of our past episodes about partition as well, and I hope that'll give you more of a contextual feeling as to why it is as it is today.
Indeed. And as you say, the birthplace of Sikhism is Punjab. Yes, it was Punjab as it was. Yeah. That Punjab no longer exists. It has been unfortunately divided. Please do watch, if you haven't seen it, do watch that podcast I did with Layla Gulen when I've talked about the history of this area, what Khalistan should be. And this is, again, an argument why we need Khalistan, and the Khalistan that we argue about in that podcast. Do watch that podcast if you'd like to know really a bit more about all that, and what certainly it seems that the majority of Sikhs believe Khalistan should be. Thank you, Minder Singh, based in Aussie, a third generation Aussie indeed. I believe Sikhs outside can talk with their own government. I think this is about the beard story, about any rules that affect them. For example, the beard issue, yes, brought up in this programme. The US Sangat needs to pressure the US government, not the Indian government or the Indian Sikhs, just my opinion. Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, and I think this is what's happening. The Sikh coalition and most of the, all of the Sikh organisations within the US, they are actually actively lobbying the US government, saying you cannot do this, you cannot discriminate against Sikhs for their articles of faith, particularly the beard. And Knockdown jumps in and said, in other words, why would you want to join the US Army? Why are you so desperate to die? If someone doesn't want to give you the opportunity to die for them, don't do it. Don't wedge yourself in every problem. And I think, again, just to jump on Knockdown's comment here, look, the Sikh community in the US, and in fact in all Western, in fact across the diaspora, they have integrated really, really well. They have adopted their host nation's flag. They have become really good integrated citizens, and I can certainly say this on behalf of British Sikhs who have really done themselves proud. They are proud Britons. They are Sikhs, of course, but they are British Sikhs, and they see themselves as British Sikhs, which is why so many have served with such distinction over decades, centuries even, in the British Army. Likewise in the US Army, they've served with distinction, and they are proud to be American. They see themselves as American Sikhs. They are still Sikhs, that doesn't stop them being Sikhs, but they are American Sikhs. And so therefore, that when you say they're desperate, they're not obviously desperate to die, they are desperate to serve. Serve being the key word. Savor, James. It's all about serving. It's their selfless service to both their nation and to their fellow human beings.
Absolutely. And let's take it to a broader context, even outside of the Sikh diaspora, and talking about all people that want to join. Now, there are benefits to being a member of the U.S. forces. You can get education programming. You can have an income to support a family where you may have other blockages to getting a good career path. This can open up those doors. You can leave the military after your service and go into law enforcement or other areas where it can give you that advantage. So there are a lot of other reasons why people will join the military. But most of all, I think that it's because of the pride that they have in protecting their country and standing for what they believe are fundamental rights and peace and democracy. So there's a lot of very ingrained reasons, but also practical reasons that I think that, by bringing in these new policies or reverting to old policies, as you may say, it is taking those opportunities away from what could be just amazing contributions to the military. Instead, they're being ignored and pushed aside.
Indeed, and our next set almost made it to Critics Corner, but didn't. AR 230, something or other. You're not any global power to dictate anything. Wake up! It's not the 18th or 19th century, dummies. Well, I don't know why this didn't make Critics Corner. Maybe I didn't want to humiliate poor AR numbers. No, we're not. We're not dictating anything. I mean, yes, there's no question that the West does interfere all over. Yeah, and we call it out. We're not. There is hypocrisy in play here, but. Ultimately, well, it's not the 18th, 19th century, it's the 21st century. And this is imperialism 21st century style. It's what India are up to just as much as anybody else. So unfortunately, it's a different world now. And well, so he who holds the biggest stick does actually tend to control the narrative, James.
That is well said, Angus.
Knockdown comes back. This is actually quite an important point. And again, we're running out of time, so I've got to quickly paraphrase this. Basically, Knockdown saying there's no way that Hindutva forces and transnational repression could exist without inside help from the countries in the West. And this is a big question. Maybe there are some in the West who are helping this. Stay Safe jumps in with quite a robust response. Well, I won't repeat it because it's almost quite rude. Do keep it polite, Stay Safe. But as you sign off, don't your time will come on Critics Corner. Well, we did, as I said, didn't quite make Critics Corner, but maybe next time, James.
That's hilarious.
And final sector, we're now run out of time. Like, comment and share, please. Yes, please do to our audience. Please help us beat this algorithm. Let us beat the Hindutva forces in Silicon Valley who are doing their absolute best to try and bury us and hide us in the algorithm. So it does help if you comment and share and tell more people about the fact we exist. And then several comments. Thank you for all your lovely support. Thanks for support for Khalistan. Well, we couldn't do this again without your support. So again, it's all about getting us out there, get more people to watch us, because then it allows us to get the Khalistan message out wider. And so the final comment, Rinku Singh, Punjab solution, Khalistan, James. We know what the final solution is. It's all about Khalistan.
Apparently it is, and that's why we're here, Angus. So, again, it's my ulterior motive as a fat guy. I'm just looking to have a nice lunch in Khalistan at an outside cafe.
Looking forward to that day, but there we must bring Perspectives for a close for yet another day. But thanks so much for watching. Do keep your comments coming in. Do let us know things that you'd like us to talk about. Just send us an email, send us a message or a comment below. The email just popped up there again. message@satellotv.com if you want to talk to us directly. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
We will see you next time.